open up to and accept because it was put to music. And that to me is why I then very much literally on that day set forward on this idea that I wanted to open the greatest nightclub in the world. And, I mean, literally, man, I was 13 and could not wait to get through high school, because literally all I wanted to do from that day on was experiment with this idea of what could you do with music, theater, art, dance, comedy. I mean, look at what Jon Stewart or Stephen Colbert do every single night with comedy. That's politics, but it creates a doorway. And that's what interests me. How do you help people go to a place they're afraid to go? In effect, even though I run a nonprofit, I would tell anybody that I'm in the bravery business. My job as a leader is to try and convince people that they have the power to do what they don't think or society may not think they can do. I'm an all hands on deck kind of guy. I think America more than ever needs all its assets coming to bear on some of these issues, which again, I come back to this reoccurring theme that I'll mention a couple of times, which is why I put so much stock on you all right there, man, in this room, and the millennial generation. You all are the biggest, most educated, freest, most technologically advanced, most diverse generation ever in the history of America, let alone the world. And you are so far from a lot of people say you're Generation Next, man. You're Generation Now. This country needs you now. We need your ideas now, your idealism now. But again, what we're going to talk about a little bit today is tactics. Because again, as I said earlier, I watch people beat their head against the wall doing the political course, which should not be underestimated. I'm still very much involved in there. But a good tactician has multiple fronts going on at once. And I chose the idea of music. And I ran nightclubs, and I went up through a very, very delightful time in American music. I was kind of coming up and working very diligently in the 1970s and 80s, and all through the 80s on nightclubs, which was a time of tremendous global explosion of new musical styles. And at the same time, I was very honored to be able to work side by side with a lot of jazz greats that were kind of on their last tours. Now, again, this is important because, I mean, like you all, man, you had to take classes you don't like. You still, to this day, I'm sure, have classes that you can't understand why they make you take it. But I knew if I wanted to run a big nightclub and put on shows, not book bands, but put on shows and create the kind of, again, deliberate messaging that I had dreamed of as a kid using music, I had to know the back of the house. I had to learn the back of the house. And I also had to learn about music and customers that were unfamiliar to me. I came up in a punk rock era. And so suddenly going to work in jazz clubs was very foreign to me, but I knew that I had to understand the way men and women who had more money and were a little bit older, how did they relate? What did they expect for a night out? And this all is very important because, again, as many of you probably challenge some of the classes you take and how they would relate in any way, shape, or form to life in the real world. Similar for me, I had to learn things in the nightclub world that seemed preposterous and really boring, considering that I wanted to put on these giant shows and save the world. And this was revealed to me, man, because one night I went out against my will, as I mentioned earlier, to serve men and women who were sleeping out on the steam grates around Washington, D.C. Show of hands, how many people have been to the nation's capital? Yeah, I mean, I assume, man, a lot of people come for service trips or just because it's part of a ritual family still make. But, it's not even Washington, D.C. Most every city you see people outside, people on the fringes, people sleeping on the street, people just barely getting by. And you all have grown up with it tragically, but in my youth, it was still semi-uncommon. You didn't see it as often. And as the number of homeless people began to explode in the 1980s, like many people, I would walk by and kind of look from a distance with kind of concern in my eyes, empathy, trying to let people know I cared, but I was caring from a distance. And when somebody asked me if I would go out in my own backyard and serve people, I mean, after 10 years of working in nightclubs, talking about changing the world with music, I tried every which way I could to avoid going out on that truck. I was, like many people, burdened by the notion of who I would encounter, what it would be like. And, I had these stereotypes in my head of like, homeless people, man, it's going to be crazy, kind of drooling, idiots, for lack of a clumsy way to say it. But I mean, again, these were these dopey stereotypes that were burdening me at the time. So anyway, on the way out, I asked a very simple question. And I'm sure it's the kind of question that many of you all asked on your volunteer service days is, I wanted to know about the system. And I was just trying to make conversation, but I asked where the food came from that they were going to serve that night, and was told it was purchased at one of the most expensive stores in DC. And I knew from my experience in the back of the house, the class I didn't want to take, I knew how much food we were throwing away every night. It was just part of a system the price you pay for a hamburger anywhere covers the cost of the hamburgers that didn't get sold. That's just part of the equation of food service. And it was a culture back then because food was so cheap, and it frankly is, compared to so much of the rest of the world, the price we pay in America is so unbelievably artificially cheap. But the sense was, man, throw it away. There's more where that came from. Don't sweat it, But I knew how much food we threw away. And a lot of my friends who had left the nightclub world to go make some better money in catering, they were talking about how at 2 a.m. they had, like insane amounts of food left over from parties that enough people didn't show up at. So I knew how much food was being thrown away, and I realized that this group was spending money night after night after night to buy food, and that kind of got me going. But then, and more importantly to our conversation, is when we started serving people. I've told this story many times, but there's a long line of people in Washington, D.C., out by George Washington University in the State Department, standing a long line down the street, huddled up in the rain, waiting for this truck to pull up. And as we dutifully started serving, here I was up in the warm truck serving people, and it kind of dawned on me that I was participating in traditional, time-honored charity, which was about the redemption of the giver, not the liberation of the receiver. And that really struck me because, I had so many conversations with men and women in line who immediately defied my stereotypes of, poverty and homelessness. And I found that there were so many people in line that were clearly just regular people stuck in a place they didn't anticipate being when they were younger, even a year ago. But there they were out on the streets of Washington, D.C. in the rain. And I kept thinking, man, restaurants have jobs, but they have food too, And on the way back, in my brain, I kind of cooked up this idea that was based on FedEx. It was saying, in effect, look, FedEx is using the city of Memphis, Tennessee as a hub for their new mail system. What happens if we had a big kitchen in town and we could get all the restaurants, the hotels, the hospitals, the universities, the farmers who have food they don't want to throw away, but just don't want to be sued? If you could create a system and you could bring that food to a central hub, you could feed more people better food for less money. But this was kind of the breakthrough, is what I thought is, wouldn't it be more interesting and more just and more in keeping with the kind of ideals that I witnessed as a young man, if instead of just feeding people, we let them come in out of the rain and I shouldn't say let, but we offer them an opportunity to come in out of the rain and be part of the solution themselves. That in effect to kind of erase this artificial divide of a table that said, I'm a volunteer, I have money, I'm going to serve you, you're poor. And that chasm, that distance, and that power dynamic wasn't serving anybody. And frankly, nobody was really happy with the situation. I don't think the men and women on the street were. And frankly, outside of the experience of serving someone which is always right and just. But I don't think even the people who were on the truck really felt good about this. So I just said, all the ingredients are there. Everything you need is there. It's just in a traditional format. And maybe if we're not afraid to break with tradition and we move the pieces around, maybe we could reveal something more powerful. So all I did was propose that we take the food our society throws away, the people our society undervalues, a kitchen, most likely at a local church that was underutilized, volunteers who wanted to be part of something powerful, chefs who had food but also had jobs and would help teach, agencies that were buying food when they really wanted to use their money to liberate people, men and women who wanted in out of the rain and wanted to be part of something and wanted to belong and be empowered to be kind of, needed. It was all there. And now I go through that long-winded description to basically set the scenario that, like I said, man, I didn't want to do this. And like many of you, and one of the reasons, again, I put myself out there every chance I can to talk to young men and women coming up, is to suggest that many of you, and some of you have already, have encountered that moment in which you propose an idea, something you thought through, something you believe in, and you've really put the time and effort in to determine that it'll work. And more importantly, you feel compelled to do it. And you propose this idea, and anybody who proposes a new idea has to be prepared to answer some of the questions, and correct some of the errors and assumptions that based on, kind of projection what people are going to say. And I knew that people were going to say, oh, well, the health department won't let you do this, or come up with other reasons. So I had answers for everything. But I became really, really shocked at how hard people fought to preserve this sense of order, this sense of this works. It works for us. No one said that out loud, but it became very clear very quick the more I made this presentation. no one was going to do it. Everyone kept finding reasons it wouldn't work. And again, in my opinion, this was basic food service 101. There was no reason it wouldn't work. It was just lack of belief, lack of faith, lack of, and I say faith very deliberately because, it was the sense that the people who were being served couldn't do it. In fact, that was the big final last straw for me, is when someone said, "You're naive to think that you can train men and women who are homeless for jobs." And I was just floored by that. That's the last thing I expected to hear someone say. But long story short, as I suggested earlier, the road split, and suddenly the road I thought was my chosen road, man, this road to opening the greatest nightclub in the world, suddenly there was this fork, this unexpected fork. I knew that if I left that room, that the men and women I encountered weren't going to do it. And if they weren't going to do it, no one else was. And I left thinking, I could have just said, "Hey, man, I tried. I'm a volunteer, man. I run nightclubs. I tried to help. They don't want my help. Forget it." But man, something just pulled at me, tugged at me and said, it's not that hard. They just don't see it. I go back to that bravery business thing, man. Most people just don't see, sometimes because they don't want to. And let's flash forward a little bit, man. I've been doing this for a long time now, the DC Central Kitchen. And I'm going to do some cool old technology here. Where is my DC Central Kitchen thing? Don't tell me I didn't pull it up. Oh, well, we'll go to LA Kitchen there. We'll play with that for a little bit. But DC Central Kitchen is very much the same thing. It's this idea that, let me find out. I've lost a picture. There we are. I'll find you. There you are. Okay. What I found in all my years of doing this, of training men and women who are homeless or addicts, people home from prison, engaging volunteers and chefs, is that most people in America are really decent people, man. They're undeniably really, really decent people. They want to be part of something bigger. They're desperate to be engaged. Yet many people want to hold on really tight to these stereotypes that says, in effect, man, if you're poor in America, it's your fault. If you're in prison, you must have done something to deserve it. If you're hungry, man, you're just lazy. Go get a job. And people want to hold on really tight to those stereotypes because it keeps them safe. And there's nothing wrong, man. No bad, no disrespect. It's human nature. And this is what's really important to get your head around leadership. It's not about being right. It's helping people who are lost find a new way. And you can't often do that by badgering people or telling people what to think. We developed a process in DC we called the calculated epiphany. It's a very simple idea. It's this idea that in effect, there were so many people who, were coming through volunteering on a daily basis that we figured that we could, if we set the stage, they could come to their own conclusion by putting them side by side with somebody who they might have thought, "I'm afraid of that person. I don't think I can do that." And this was from young men and women in middle school volunteering all the way up to the President of the United States. This constant reinforcement, this idea that at the DC Central Kitchen, we approach this response as a community response. This is side by side. This is everybody. A student doing service hours, someone home from prison, the President of the United States. We were Washingtonians, equal in our responsibility to make our community better. And that was the challenge, is by setting the stage so that people, in effect, spend a whole day cooking. And we do 5,000 meals a day. So by the end of the day, you would hear conversations and people exchanging cards and hugging and taking pictures. And again, people who, when you say, I'd watch people come down the back alley of this shelter in DC, and in effect, they had been told, "Hey, man, you're going to the basement of a shelter where they're cooking 5,000 meals using food that was going to be thrown away, and they're training homeless people for jobs," right? Now, most people are, that's cool, but a lot of people, you could see in the back of their heads, they're thinking, basement, man, that's going to be dark and dirty. 5,000 meals, man, it's going to be big old pots of oatmeal or sludge or something, and homeless people with knives. So you could tell people were going to come in all kinds of burdened by these images. And what we set out to do very, very purposely was gently, one by one, pull back those layers for them and help them see what I saw that first night, So we just set that stage over and over again. We ended up developing a catering company. We wanted to make our own money because as I started to get a little bit further down the road, I needed to be able to speak with a little bit more forcefulness about some of the issues of hunger and poverty without being worried that if I stepped out of line too far, I wouldn't get that grant. So earning our own money allowed us to start employing men and women. Sometimes the men and women who, because of their records, were almost impossible to get work for because they had come home after 10, 20, 30 years with a record for a violent crime. And, my bag was always, nobody's too far down that they can't come back up. And I wanted to be that place that gave people a shot. So there were opportunities that presented themselves within our kitchen to hire people to work there. And we jumped at it. When I left DC Central Kitchen, we were an $11 million a year social enterprise. We had about 140 people on the payroll. The majority are men and women who were home from prison or graduates of our job training program. We started everybody at $13 an hour. Again, we wanted to say, look, if a nonprofit can hire a felon, pay the living wage, provide healthcare benefits, and make profit, anybody can do it. Again, I go back to this idea that our job wasn't trying to fix the problem. It was to reveal larger truths, to show the power of new ways of thinking. I mean, let's go back a little bit to nonprofits making money. We were doing a contract to do school food. We were one of the very first partners with the Obama administration to kind of pilot ideas about locally sourced cooked from scratch meals. And of course, we added the extra dynamic of having men and women in our central commissary kitchen who were home from prison doing all the cooking. So in effect, it was hardcore felons cooking locally sourced cooked from scratch meals that were then served by graduates with less checkered backgrounds in the schools themselves. So again, you had this really cool image, of something really powerful that people question. So the idea that we could actually engage students in this discussion about what do you want to eat? What do you think you would like to be part of? Having students come into the kitchen, then have the men and women cook for them and do testing menus. It was a real glorious experiment in letting other people be leaders. A leader doesn't create followers, man. They create more leaders. And as a friend of mine once said, man, if you're a leader and no one's following you, you're just taking a walk. So, I've always been really interested in how do you empower the entire staff in the organization? How is everybody part of development? How about is everybody part of marketing? Instead of the lone executive, the founder having to be the face of everything, how can everyone have a sense of opportunity to determine the future of the organization? Now, we're moving about to the halfway mark. I'm going to talk a little bit about the DC Central, the LA kitchen, and a little bit about some of the political work I do, and then we'll open it up a little bit. When I was a young man, I went to a party, and I met a guy who we're talking about, what do you do? And he said he was a futurist. And I was like, what's that? He's like, dude, it's not Star Trek, man. It's just probability and trends. And that really fascinated me because it's like, that's what I do. I didn't realize there was the kind of a word for it. It's like I was doing social enterprise before there was a kind of a word for it. But I became really interested in this, and I became very interested in probability. I mean, you can't really predict the future, but if you look at trends, you can determine things that are highly likely, and that's probability. Now, for example, baby boomers, my generation, there's almost 80 million of us. More than half are women. Now, that generation is going to live longer than any generation ever. So it's highly likely that there will be, sooner or later, a robust discussion about what is beauty, eventually what is success, what is happiness. These things are highly probable. So a forward-thinking leader can get ahead of the curve and start to initiate conversation. Again, why wait for it to happen when you can make it happen? And that's what started to think about me, because when I started to really think about the future, I looked at the business I'd built. Here we were, one of the most efficient, effective organizations in the world. Yet, at the end of the day, we were serving a lot of people who were working people leftover food from restaurants. And I didn't want to get so lost in making that more efficient, because at the end of the day, that's not the country I want to live in. That can't be our solution. So how do you use that vehicle to draw people over this larger discussion? Well, as I started to really think about this and ponder the future, I became aware that the food that food banks, pantries, many of the places that you all will eventually volunteer as you kind of begin this journey in Manhattan, and as new men and women who are coming into the university and the town, and sometimes even the state, and you're going to fan out and start doing service, you'll encounter a lot of these programs that rely on food that's donated. Well, you got to understand, man, that food has lost profit. Somebody bought it, cooked it, grew it. They couldn't sell it, so they donated it to charity. That's a big deal, because if you think about that, in this current economy, that means that what you can predict down the road is that we're going to have less and less and less food available to give away, that businesses are going to become more sophisticated in their inventory controls. So that concerned me. And what I started to see was that the food we were getting, as it decreased, what was left in the system was primarily processed junk food, that we were in effect, poisoning people. And again, think about this kind of leadership, man. What would happen if I got all kinds of prizes for feeding 5,000 people a day? You know, I was surprised how few people ever asked, what kind of meals are you serving? I would get prizes. People, when you'd say, you know, Robert founded the DC Central Kitchen, they do 5,000 meals a day. I'd watch audiences say, you know, and no one's thought, yeah, but dude, what happened? What kind of food? I mean, you know, for your generation, you know, I think too often my generation's charitable response, all we've done is lit a fuse on a diabetes bomb that's going to go off when you all come into town. So again, it's important to ask much more deliberate questions about a system and not just accept it because it's wrapped up in good deeds. And that's too often we really haven't challenged charity the way we need to. Not that it's wrong, it's just that we're doing it the wrong way. But again, back to less food coming in, man, I became wildly aware of the baby boomers, that we're going to live longer than any generation. I know some of you all wish, man, that someday we just wake up, you'd wake up one morning and we'd all be gone. But that isn't going to happen. Short of an asteroid hitting the earth, man, the boomers are here for a long time. Man, every single morning, 10,000 people turn 67 in America, every single morning. And that's not going to stop for like 25 years. So this is a reality, man. So I know that there's less food coming in. You can predict, and I mean with wildly frightening accuracy, that the number of people who are hungry in America is going to grow exponentially, and it's going to be more and more and more older people. And they're not going to have the same opportunities, the same needs, the same strengths as the people we built a system to serve. So suddenly it was like, wow, we need to do something now, not next week, not 2 years from now. I discovered in the early 2000s, there was a waiting list in half of American cities for Meals on Wheels. So I set out to basically be kind of a Paul Revere of sorts, to say, in effect, we got to come up with a brand new system. So I moved to LA very deliberately. One of the things that we pioneered in DC was this idea, again, breaking from the norm. The traditional model is we would say to farmers, we wanted to get more fruits and vegetables. We would literally say to a farmer, okay, you know, wait for a couple of days until that food's so rotten that you give it to us, you donate it. Well, we just came out and said, hey man, how about if we come out a week earlier and buy it from you fresh, the stuff you can't sell because it's cosmetically imperfect, geometrically irregular, or just too expensive to bring market. We'll give you 10 cents, 20 cents on the dollar for it. Boom, it opened a huge doorway for us to do business. Because when you buy food, you can resell it. And that gave us an avenue for school food and catering and selling the kind of locally sourced stuff that a lot of people want now. So by coming to Los Angeles, man, you can't see it now. Well, here, I'll turn it around. I don't think you can see it out there, but somewhere right out there, man, is the Central Valley of California, man. It's one of the most amazing, even in our drought, it still is one of the most amazing agricultural phenomenons in the history of the world. And millions and millions, billions and billions of pounds of fruits and vegetables are dished under every year because they can't be sold. Little sidebar, we throw away about 40% of the food we produce every day in America, but half of that's fruits and vegetables. So by positioning myself here, I have the perfect spot to do a giant processing kitchen where we convert all those fruits and vegetables into healthy, balanced, locally sourced meals. On top of that, I know that there's a generation of baby boomers coming who will be much more open to healthy food. They're going to want healthy food. They're going to be much more aware of their medical backgrounds. In fact, with the Affordable Care Act, you're going to see more and more doctors 5 years, 10 years down the road prescribing food as part of a balanced regime that includes medications. So in anticipation of that, rather than wait for it, I came to LA, got the food, you got the need. It's one of the biggest concentrations of older people living in poverty in America. So the need's here already, but you also have media. And media is how you transmit big new ideas fast. And when I say that, man, it's not for the glory of Robert or the LA Kitchen. It's just that, you know, tick, 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 man. Again, every morning, 10,000 people, the boomers are coming in. No city is prepared for this inevitability. How do you care for this wildly large, rapidly aging population? But more importantly, let's go back to leadership and then we'll open up. Man, I'm not here to feed the poor better. Sure, that's kind of what my bag is. I like the mechanics of how do you set something up like that so it's efficient, effective, does good work. But man, I'm interested in how do we redefine aging in America? You know, ultimately my bag is no waste. Food, people, time, money, ideas, energy, you know, your generation, my generation. There's too much out there. There's too much powerful stuff that we just sometimes ignore because it's old, it's bent, it's bruised. It's a felon. It's homeless. It's whatever. You know what I mean? My bag is no waste. So I'm out here in LA to develop, I think, a very bold new machine that will offer any city. I'm open source. I give anything I have away. I'm not interested in trying to control knowledge. So I'm here trying to develop a really solid model that work anywhere. And at the same time, hopefully, for you all who are looking down the road and considering a journey like this, I'd like to think that a small portion of my experiment is also, how do I live a life that can effectively say, you can do this, you can hold on to the dreams of your youth, not necessarily act young or be young, but you can still believe fervently. You can still go out every day and feel passionately, even when you're 56, 60, 70, 80, you can still rock every day. That's kind of my ongoing sense of leadership in my journey. I'm glad to share a little of it with you today. So thanks for your attention for this beginning part. And it looks like we have another 20 minutes or so. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments, man? I'm happy. Bring it on.
Can we real quick and then we'll do some questions? So I think what we'll do, since you need the mic for him to hear you, is I've got a couple down here. Just come on up. And I believe we also have some in Umberger. So we'll just switch.
And man, you can ask me any question you want. You can be personal. You can be, ask business, whatever you want to talk about, politics.
All right. So who wants to go first?
Thank you, the dude in the white tee.
Hello, Mr. Eggert. My name is Andrew Pushin, and I'm a freshman here at K-State.
Right on.
How front do you combat hunger?
Say that again, man.
How on the political front do you combat hunger?
Well, I think it's important that we acknowledge that hunger exists. For too many politicians, it still seems, again, like this is a judgment call. You're lazy, you're corrupt, blah, blah, blah. And my thing is like, look, man, this is just business 101 for America. Hungry students can't learn. We can't compete in a global economy. I hate to make it about, I really hate to make this analogy, but I think when you argue with people or try and make people aware, you have to use every asset you have. So I would, in certain circumstances, make a case that by having a malnourished younger generation, we can't potentially fight a foreign war and have people who are prepared to go. Like I said, I would normally not make that argument, but it is a legitimate thing to make. Secondly, I talk a lot about economics. I try to avoid right, wrong, good, bad. I always say I don't do left, right, Democrat, Republican. I do smart, dumb. And it's, in my opinion, it's dumb business for America not to just buck up and feed people. Now, the other flip side is for an aging population in particular, man, these are women who fought for equal pay, man. This is civil rights pioneers, men and women who fought in foreign wars. They're just people who built our communities. And I just think we, as Americans, we owe a greater debt to our elders than we have historically been prepared to pay. And it doesn't cost that much money. But one final barrier, and I think this is really important, because again, I'm just one sliver of the nonprofit pie in America. And too often our world at large, but in particular our elected leaders, they have kind of a bifurcated lens when it comes to the economy. They think .coms, businesses, drive the economy, while .orgs, charity, do good deeds. And frankly, too many people think we take from a community. We're one of the largest sources of outside investment dollars coming in from outside a community in. In fact, I would make a case that if you look hard at Manhattan, what you'll see is between the university, and in fact, think about this, man. You can't make profit in America without nonprofits, because we do healthcare, education, arts and culture, communities of faith, clean air and water, all the things that make a town livable, the kind of place where you can generate profit because people live there, they come there. Without us, there is none. So I really like to think we need to start electing people who aren't burdened by this .com, .org, because I think more and more it's a generalization, Andrew, but I look at your generation, I see a group of people that are interested in merging spirituality, lifestyle, income, saying in effect, look, man, I got to pay my student loans back. I can't work for nothing. But if I can find a job where I not only don't do harm, I do good, sign me up. And to me, you want to elect mayors who stop and think, wow, I got a university here. And if I can say to those those graduates, hey, man, why don't you stay in Manhattan? If you've got a crazy idea for a social enterprise that reinvests its profit over and over again in the community, I'd like to help you get there. If you've got a way to keep our elders in Manhattan engaged and active and working, and being productive citizens, I'd love to work with you. To me, that's what I think is essential, is that we elect people who really see the nonprofit sector as like that fifth ace in the deck that no one knows is there.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you for asking. I appreciate you being the first up.
No problem.
Hi, Mr. Egger. I'm Katie Dunn, and I was wondering, how did you combat having all those doors slammed in your faces in the beginning when people like didn't really like your vision?
Well, Katie, you get used to it to a certain extent. I'm getting them slammed now, man. I'm up against it. I'll be honest with you, my leadership is being sorely tested right now. You know, part of leadership is, again, being out front. But being out front sometimes means people haven't you're around the curve. You can see the other side. Most people are back there. So I'm here trying to talk to people about aging, about social enterprise and creating a alternative to Meals on Wheels. I have no disrespect for Meals on Wheels. I just know there's a generation coming that's going to want a very different kind of meal. So not only do I have to try and convince people that there is a business opportunity here, not only do I have to inspire people to kind of move beyond the comfort zone of most people right now would rather talk about childhood hunger. Childhood hunger is where most corporations want to put their money because that's, innocent and sweet. I'm trying to convince people to do something bigger, bolder, and frankly more, I won't say just, but equal, and just because you have a good idea doesn't mean people are going to listen. And quite frankly, one of the things you have to get used to with leadership is the perennial need to kind of constantly accept that, you're going to have to keep working hard. I'm in LA and I tell myself all the time, I know it's a different generation thing, but the movie The Godfather?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Francis Ford Coppola, the director of The Godfather, he won every Academy Award you can get for that movie. The next day he went out and tried to pitch a new movie called Apocalypse Now. Nobody would give him a dime. So I always tell myself sometimes that, dude, I've been doing this 25 years and part of me feels like, man, I'm like the Bruce Springsteen of this business. Yet I'm still sometimes having to go out and audition, but that's just part of the bag. You can't get up on your high horse about this. Social change demands a little bit of humility, a whole lot of tenacity, faith in yourself, and a thick skin. There's nothing easy, young sister, on this journey. But this is, if I can offer one bit of advice, I tell you, I love Facebook. I think Facebook is, as much as I think Zuckerberg is a devil in some fronts, I love being able to wake up every morning and say happy birthday to a whole bunch of my friends. Nothing makes me happier. Every day I start my day by saying happy birthday to people. And some of the friends you're going to make now, at school are going to be the best friends you're going to have in your life. But because just because you're friends now doesn't mean you're friends forever. Just because you're in love with someone now doesn't mean you'll be in love forever. Just because you got a job you love doesn't mean a year from now you'll still love that job. This is where the hard work of making things fresh comes in. But I urge you to, in particular, focus on the friends you have and nurture the friends you have. Don't forget the friends you left back home, those high school friends, those young friends that you learned to ride a bike with, or, whatever the things you did when you were young. Don't forget them too. Facebook's cool, but every once in a while, send somebody a little written note just saying, in fact, I travel with postcard stamps. And whenever I see something like a postcard and I can send a note saying it's like if I'm in Kansas and I see a beautiful picture of sunflower, man, I'll buy 12 of them and send it to people saying, man, you're prettier than this. You make me feel happier than this. Just something to say, you're important to me. Your friendship is valuable to me. Because when you hit those walls, and you will, you want to be able to call somebody and say, man, remind me, I'm still a badass, right? I still rock, right? And you want friends who were like, yeah, dude, you still shut up, go back to work. You're fine, go. Those friends won't be there unless you nurture those friends. So don't underestimate. None of you, please, in this room, underestimate the friendships you're making now. Because again, these college friends are some of the best friends you'll ever have in your life. I had a call the other day from a kid I've known since we were in kindergarten together, and his mom passed. And we wept on the phone together, and that's the kind of friends I want to keep in my life, friends like that are, that are very important because, man, life is a hard road. And I think if you're lucky and you find a cool gig like I've got, it makes the road a real joy because you feel like you're contributing. And there will be those, I tell you, and I know I'm riffing here for a little bit, but I tell you, man, when you go home and you say, hey, Mom, Pop, man, I heard this guy talking and, made me think about it. I think I might want to work at a nonprofit someday. I guarantee you the universal noise every parent makes. And it goes like this. It's like, I don't know, why don't you study law or get an MBA and then make a bunch of money and give it back, and there's going to be those who try and challenge you. I mean, I'd go back to every high school reunion for 20 years, man, And people would say, hey man, are you still doing that homeless thing? And it's like, yeah, that's what I do. This is my career. It's my profession. But again, like I said, I just urge you on this room who have a dream, an itch, a desire to make the world a better place, go for it. As I said earlier, man, our generation, my generation, this country needs fresh, bold, new ideas. And I bet you all have a lot of them.
Thank you. I really like the encouragement and perseverance.
I'm behind you 100%. You'll never go hungry in LA.
Hi, my name is Ashley Bunker, and I am a junior here at K-State. You talked at the beginning of the presentation about how people seem scared to listen to speeches about the future, but yet for some reason they weren't afraid to listen to music about the future or about current issues or future issues. I'm guessing you're not singing to people to donate or to help or to come to the kitchen. So I guess my question is, how did you get people to not be afraid about your vision?
Cool question. You know what? Crazy as it sounds, the kitchen became my nightclub. When I first opened it, it was like I couldn't wait to get it going so I could run back to do nightclubs. But, what happened, Ashley, is I realized that I had inadvertently touched a wild nerve in America, that people were genuinely upset about how much food we threw away. And the more I started to experiment, and you have to understand too, it was a different era. It was the 1990s. So suddenly the internet and cable television popped up. So suddenly there was the Food Network, and chefs were becoming very popular. They were kind of the new rock stars. So suddenly I realized that food could do the same thing music did, and that chefs were in effect the musicians of a new generation. So again, what I constantly try and do is just metaphorically tilt my head, try and see things a little bit askew, see things that other people don't see and opportunities that are there. Part of my whole bag has always been whatever you need exists in most communities. You don't have to build something brand new. Now I say that fully aware that I'm building a $2 million kitchen here. I've never done something this big before, but between supply of food coming in and demand, I have to build something big. I don't have a choice. But historically, my bag has been you can get whatever you need. But our kitchen was located right below the Capitol of the United States. So as I mentioned earlier, this idea of the show you could put on that would involve 14,000 volunteers every year coming in, which were in effect not only potential audience members, but participants too. You had, again, movie stars and politicians and presidents and foreign dignitaries and addicts and homeless people. And so it made for a really, I think, really profoundly fun show every day. But that's the way I approached it. This is a show. It's supposed to be fun, dynamic. We're supposed to challenge people. Just when they think they got you figured out, throw them a curveball, launch a business, start to employ felons, launch a political campaign. I started a political group trying to, again, as I mentioned, I think with Andrew earlier, this idea of can you help politicians understand the dynamic economic role nonprofits play so that in effect, when they look at a budget, they see a whole roster of options to play with. But again, I go back to this idea of it's about creativity and recognizing that, most people don't want to be told what to do or where to go. So the best thing you can do is have patience. It's almost like, as you will find, raising a child someday. You can tell your kid the way they're supposed to act, or you can raise them in a way in which they come to their own decisions. And that's not easy, but you get my point. That's the way I try and do my business, the calculated epiphany.
Molly Brace, freshman, Mr. Egger. What advice do you give us on attacking hunger in Manhattan?
Well, again, I'm a big believer right now that it's not enough just to feed people what is donated, because again, you have to be aware of the nutritional content of what you're serving. Now, Kansas is an agriculture state, and frankly, it's one of the few states left where there still is remnants of the agriculture. Literally, these are two very different words that I'm fascinated when you put it together. What was it like, and in fact, it's interesting, just to riff for a second, years ago, I'd go to Kansas City a lot, and I'd stand in front of the train station there that's now a science museum, and I'd look at the parking lot and just imagine that in this very parking lot in World War I, trucks, wagons, would pull up and drop off the sons of the farmers who were going off to work, or going off to war. And this was huge, man, because you needed sinew and flesh to bring in the crops. So sending your son or sons off to war was a huge risk, both from your heart, but your homestead. And through those doors, at the end of World War II, they flew up and all those young men came home and they went back to the farm. Now, the same thing happened in World War II. The wildest thing in one of the history of the world, man, never before in the history of the planet did an army come home and not go back to the farm. At the end of World War II, the GI Bill, we basically ended our agriculture in America, in which we were tethered together in this kind of rural economy. And we started to really explore this more industrial farming system. Now, again, there are still many communities you all well know, and some of you may be from them, that are still very much rooted in an agriculture. But I go back to this idea, even though that Kansas still is probably more driven by monocrops than small farms, this economic principle I'm working on is that, again, farms throw away an inordinate amount of their product because it isn't cosmetically perfect. You can't sell it, which gives charities an opportunity now to explore this idea, and this is the model I'm working on, is cities have contracts to serve Meals on Wheels or older people, right? And the historic contract has been for processed meals that are oftentimes frozen. Now, you can do some research, and I urge you to please go into Manhattan and look at the senior services system and see what's there. Because what I think you're going to have more and more is a generation who's going to want that local food. Now, if I'm the mayor and I'm thinking, wait a second now, I've got this money that we got to give out. If I can find a way to leverage that money so it's supporting local farms and buying the food they can't sell, great, I'm helping that farmer stay solvent. And if I can use that food to lower the cost to produce a healthier meal that's going to basically lower the healthcare costs down the road, that's a really good idea. If a nonprofit can employ men and women who might cost the state money because they didn't have a job and they went back to prison, that's good business for Kansas. See what I'm getting at? There's a whole lot of things here that allow us to go beyond the traditional model of let's take what's donated and give it away and do it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and start to recognize that your generation can't afford this. Your generation must be actively engaged in applying everything they're teaching you at the university, and not just kind of the stuff we're talking about today, but in the business school, the engineering school, the medical school. And I urge you to realize that on campus, some of the best resources you have in the entire state are sitting there already. And it's young people who've already tasted the joy that comes with a good service experience. And for those men and women who are thinking to themselves, man, is there a way I could maybe do this? Is this kind of a buzz, a high, a job, something I could actually do? And I urge you to really think about that, but not, again, as I go back to you, man, not as it exists now. I just urge you to look at it with that tilted eye and say, is there another way we can do that makes more sense? And just so you know, man, I'm easy to find. I'm R. Egger at LA Kitchen. I'm Robert Egger on Facebook. If you want to be Facebook friends, whatever, I'm open, man. I'll be friends with anybody and I'll help anybody. And I'll pretty much always reply to an email pretty promptly if you send something. So if any of you all on your journey into Manhattan or into Kansas or anywhere along your life decide you want to go down this road or something like it and you think I can help, reach out, man. I'll be there.
Thank you.
Could you repeat your email real quick?
Yeah, it's just R. Egger, so it's R-E-G-G-E-R, palindrome, if you'll note. R. Egger at lakitchen.org. And my Twitter handle is at Robert Egger, and I'm at Robert Egger on Instagram and Robert Egger on Facebook. And I use all those mediums. I think going back to Ashley's question earlier is not only do we put on a show every day, but I think we work really hard to transmit that show via all the amazing new media categories. And that includes videos. Like, I think if you go back, did it come up earlier? Was I able to share screen and do that LA Kitchen thing? Did you all see that? Let me see if I can get that up just so you got it. I'm not sure if that's up yet or if you can see it. I don't know why it was supposed to split the share screen there. But anyway, if you go to the LA Kitchen website, you'll see all of the different ways in which we try and use media to inspire people, bring people in as volunteers, as donors, as financial partners, but also, again, use our visuals to give people an exciting example of a new idea.
Hi, Mr. Egger. My name is Kelsey. I'm a senior. Obviously, LA Kitchen does a lot to help with hunger, but do you guys have programs to help with your homeless population and getting them no longer homeless?
You know, it's funny, Kelsey, I could tell you were a senior by that big brain you were dragging around with you as you came up to the stage there. Yeah, man, you know, I also look for where there are gaps in services. So, for example, people, now LA, as you know, is one of the biggest, and it's tragic, man, the reality of homelessness in LA. It's probably the most tragic urban homeless population I've ever seen. It's like 16,000 people on any given day, but there's so many services, so many programs that I felt that the real need wasn't there. If I thought there was need or if there was an opportunity, I'd jump at it. But again, I'm trying to find where is the most important space for my brain and my experience now. For example, another thing is people asked, are you going to have a garden? And it's like, I get it, you know, that's cool, but that's not my bag. But if I can take the money I have for the contracts I have, right, and symbolically buy from a local middle school, say there's a middle school with a really cool community garden project, and they're growing all stuff, and if I can say, hey, man, I'll give you $200 for everything you grew, or whatever the fair price would be. You know, I can use the grant, the contract money I have to show a line of how a nonprofit can share the money it brings in and kind of, you know, shoot resources out in the community. So imagine if you're a middle schooler and you've started a garden and suddenly you're doing business with a highly visible nonprofit organization that's buying your food to prepare healthier meals for seniors who will in turn potentially send a little video to the school saying, hey man, thank you. Thank you for that healthy meal you all grew for me. You know, if I'm a kid and I'm in 8th grade and I can see that kind of connection, man, right on. You know, I see the power, and I go back to this agriculture. I can see with my own eyes that concept of what it means to be a member of a community, what it means to help somebody else along the road. And also I can see that I can profit while doing that it's not wrong. Too often we wrap up what we do in ashes and sackcloth, and we make people all sometimes feel guilty if they have a good time. I want people to have a good time when they come and volunteer with us. You know, I want people to leave inspired and really like just in effect saying, you know, wow, I want to come back. So again, I just try and find those gaps. And what I'm worried about, and I urge you, if you're interested in this subject, is demographics. It's a fascinating thing to study because you can start to really see trends. And what I predict, sadly, Kelsey, is an explosion of older people coming into the ranks of the homeless. Because what you've got is millions of older people who don't have enough money in the bank for the extra year science is going to give them. And what I don't want to see is people leaving their homes. You know, I go back to, I think, Andrew's question about politics. You know, two of the great economic essentials in America right now is that an older generation live at home and independent as long as possible and stay productive as long as possible. So healthy meals means people can stay at home. Volunteerism means people get out in the community and stay productive. So this is why I want to elect people, but this is kind of the mission I'm on, is trying to draw people into that idea that while wasting food is a tragic thing in America, the greater tragedy is that we waste people. And so I want to reveal this idea of, I almost want to say, and I know we're getting close here, but part of why I chose LA also is, you know, can you think of a more challenging place than Los Angeles to try and make aging cool? I mean, this is the temple of youth in America, you know, and that idea of trying to get LA to embrace its gray, to in effect, not only individually, to say in effect, you know, to women in particular, but to all people, you know, you're beautiful the way you are. You know, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do to be beautiful. But also saying to our city, we should embrace our older people because they have so much to offer. They have so much experience. Let's not forget that this was a very intricate part of the agriculture, that you valued the role that your elders played in keeping your society whole. I just want to go back to that idea that all people have value. And I don't want to pit young against old, you know, give people this false choice that they have to feed kids or the homeless or old people. Frankly, there's enough food for everybody in America to eat. It's just a matter of coming up with the right system and the political will.
Mr. Egger, this is going to be our last question.
Dang. I hate when this happens.
I know, I'm sorry. Good evening, Mr. Egger. My name is Tyson Crowd. I'm a freshman. So I'm actually, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm looking for a little bit more focus. How do you get your foot in the door? How do you get people to listen to you anyway on, I mean, any issue, but hunger as an example?
Well, hey, before we go further, I want to give props to the camera person, man. Whoever that is doing a great job of keeping us face to face. You know, man, I urge you. I do a lot of public speaking, and again, I was always comfortable speaking, but a lot of what you have to do is develop your own sense of confidence, not only in your idea, and that means research and really use your friends, use your professors there. But if you've got an idea, man, hone it down and don't be afraid of criticism. Again, I'm in the middle of a process now in which I'm getting beat up by this town in many respects, and it involves me having to adjust and adapt and change some of my ideas. And you got to be thin-skinned that way. I mean, or thick-skinned. You can't take it personal when people challenge ideas. That's what you ask for. Secondly, you know, practice public speaking, man. Get out there and, you know, use that moneymaker, my brother. Look at you. You're a handsome young guy out there. I mean, work that thing. You know, go out there and you know, and get used to talking to people, making eye contact, reading people. You know, am I getting to them? Because sometimes you can just say the same thing over and over. And if it's not working, man, try something new. But developing those skills, you know, those written skills. And I also urge you, even though I know your generation hasn't been as prone, but the power of the written word is always important, man. You know, you're never going to get money unless you have the ability to write your ideas down, you know, very concisely, grammatically correct. Because people oftentimes will say, this is great, give me a 2-page letter of intent. Tell me what you want to do if I give you $1 million. You know, and I'm used to, you know, I've raised a lot of money in my life. And even though I can make a great, strong pitch person to person, ultimately I got to be able to write my ideas down, and they have to make sense from a business perspective. So again, practice those writing skills, practice the, you know, public speaking, develop a thick skin and a great network of people who will bounce ideas off you. But again, man, look if you can for that opportunity that others don't see. And this is why I tell people to study demographics. If you can see opportunities around the bend, if you can see something other people don't, it doesn't make it easier. As I said to Ashley last time, I mean, if I wanted to make a bunch of money now, I'd be saying, I want to create healthy meals for kids. That's where the money is. I'm not here to make money, man. I'm here to make money. You know, so I have to go where I have to go, where the need demands. But at the same time, I also urge you to never be afraid to reach out to somebody. And I'll put myself up as an example, man. I don't want to sound like this, but there would be some people who might be intimidated and think, well, Robert runs his kitchen, or Robert has a book, or Robert's done this or that. You know, I couldn't just reach out. Yes, you can reach out. If somebody has some knowledge you want, never be weirded out about just sending a cold email and saying, hey man, just a question. Can you and I talk? You know, one of the best friends I've made in my life is a young guy who now is a development director at the DC Central Kitchen. And he was a student at Ithaca College in New York. And his professor said, you know, he's like, I really like this guy's book. I want to reach out, but I couldn't do it. And his professor said, do it. And we kicked it off immediately, man. And he ended up working for me. He's raised millions of dollars. I really felt comfortable leaving DC and moving here because I knew he was in charge in many respects. And all that took was a little bit of courage on his part. So, you know, never be afraid to double down on courage and go for it.
Thank you.
And then before I get like, you know, ushered out, again, really, it's a big thanks, man. I have a big place in my heart for the Little Apple. I've been there. I've worked with students from there. I'm really committed, and I'm really honored for this opportunity. I hope I was a little bit engaging and pushed a few envelopes for you, and I look forward to a conversation with any of you anytime down the road. Thanks a lot.
Can we thank you, Robert. Let's all thank him one more time. Stick around for a second, guys. Cool. Thank you.